Hi there, everybody. I think I need my glasses, otherwise it's not going to happen. Sorry about that. It's just a set behind. This question tonight is from Dominic Cannon Clark from Scotland. And he asks, from your perspective, what is the soul? Where is it located? Is it the subtle energy system around the body? Is it included on or in the body? What is its purpose and how does it interact with the body and personality? Wow. Well, this is a loaded question. In our whole world, we have a whole different bunch of definitions about the soul. And there are people who don't believe in it, but they talk about something similar to it, and they call it a different name. There's always been a lookout for an intermediate state between these planes here and an infinite or God or godlike state or beingness. And often the word soul is being used as one of these particular words that could be used for this kind of thing. Also higher self, also the term self, capital S, using. So many people write about these things and they engage with this idea as if it's easy to understand, and I don't think it's that easy to understand. The Eastern orientation talks about an intermediate state between the nature world, the one we live in, and the energies that relate to it that we use for purposes of engaging with life. And they talk about another state, a state that they call Purusha. And they say, well, if you're linking up between these states and a higher state, then you're going to have to be able to deal with this higher state. Well, we run into trouble right away when we look at this, because some people in the older traditions have said if you engage with a very high state, then it'll be very hurtful to you on these very low states. And they used all kinds of metaphors for that particular thing, like fire and all the rest of it. But you're asking me about what I think. So I think I'm more inclined to believe that there is a relationship with a mechanism, energetic mechanism, that relates to the chakras or the Sephiroth, or whatever else you want to call these. Japanese, I think, call them fireballs, not Chinese too. And they're like step down. It's like a step down transformer, and that I would call a soul mechanism. My goodness, in our Western tradition, Christian Western tradition, of course, no one talks about it that way, but in the Hindu, Buddhist tradition, Taoist traditions, the Hebrew traditions, and Islamic traditions, they talk about the entering of energy from one state into another. My words, I'm afraid. And I believe that this soul mechanism, or this method of engaging between one state and another, is nothing but a helping system that allows us to engage in life with energy from other, let's say, higher mental planes, higher emotional planes, even higher physical planes, so that we can learn ultimately to be able to handle more energy flowing through into these planes where we use them rather coarsely, and to get our own way and to engage and come up with ideas and profoundly relate to them as if they're valuable, all the rest of it. And I think this is a natural, normal thing on these coarser states. And all you have to do is look around and see what our dominances are with respect to what we think is right, wrong, and the arguments we have for and against all of these things. And we use intensity for our own purposes so that we feel more comforted by the idea that we're presenting. And I think these chakras, or Zephyrat, or tunnels through, or funnels through which energy can express itself from other states, is monitored to some degree by the capacity we have to handle these energies moving through. The Eastern tradition says that, first of all, you have to open somewhat all the way up to the top of the head from the base of the spine, of course, they say, or up the front, back. Some traditions say up the sides, so that little by little, the personas that we use for purposes that relate to the coarser levels can be softened, and wisdom can come in, or intelligence can come into our minds differently than what we initially believe. And it helps us to reconsider and perhaps become more perceptive of those actual occurrences, actual energy moving through us, so that we can begin to understand that there is a reality in that way of engaging with higher states by perception itself, either physically, emotionally, mentally. And then slowly begin to understand that maybe this may be a pathway that we can use, of course, through meditation and prayer, one could say, so that more and more energy can operate through us, and we would not use it for our own self-interest. Initially, on these coarser levels, we will tend to use more energy if we had it at our disposal for our own personal views, our own personal uses. That's probably one of the reasons why many religious backgrounds and philosophical backgrounds, some, not all, have really focused on the idea of us beginning or attempting to be kinder, respectful, cooperative, try to understand deeper than we currently do, ideas that might be respectful of others and ourselves, of course, rather than becoming more aggressive because we can, and coarser because it means that we're more powerful and make others feel less secure, or try to imply that we are more powerful and can hurt other people if they're not good. This kind of typical kind of idea that used to be used even in families back in the in the 40s and 30s, which was really, in a kind of a way, a method of survival. A method, underline A, it's meaning one. There are many others. The concept of soul, then, may be a lot bigger than what we sometimes think of. And then there's the concept of the oversoul that some use in the West, meaning that we are all linked together, whether we like it or not. And that which supports an internal kindness or spiritual growth in one affects others automatically, spreads a bit like wildfire. Fire. Sorry, I'll get it right. The ability to be able to figure this out rests on conscious awareness. And the next step is to realize that we have ideas that may or may not be true. And then, do we have the capacity to allow ourselves to inquire past what we already believe has to be a stalwart in how we think and how we understand things? No, it's not so simple when you're dealing with ideas. It's not so simple when you're dealing with perceptions either, because there are many who, for example, become clairvoyant on the etheric level or whatever levels they happen to be. And their focal point is, generally speaking, influenced by what they believed before or what they read and what they understand or misunderstand. This is a natural state and a natural tendency. For me, there's a huge reservoir of existence, personalized as well, individualized, individuated, if you want to, where an individual might live many, many lifetimes, and they are moving towards a time in their existence when they can become conscious of the fact that there have been many lifetimes previously and many, many phases of existence, and realize that even in their relationship with life now is just another phase of existence. And these levels that we live in are just levels of existence. And there might be a lot of other levels of existence that do exist. And they're quite different than what we currently understand, because we usually assess things based on how we currently understand them. The current beliefs that are a part of our cultures. And that culture has an S on it, because all belief systems are not exactly the same. It's not a numbers game. If there were 5 billion people who believe this way, it must be more right than 2 billion people believing that way. It's not like that. In a kind of a way, we're involved with an inquiry into something that may supersede belief systems at some point. Yet at the same time, the belief systems we have now certainly encourage us to consider their worth and their value, plus other options that might be available to an individual based on their particular experience. No matter what we come up with respect to this soul orientation, it still seems to me, if it makes sense to understand that it may be a mechanism that prepares us and helps us to be able to learn how to use higher state energies on these levels, the coarser levels, uh, then we're in for an interesting time, because we're still primarily focused on our own individuality being as important or more important than somebody else's. It's fairly coarse orientation, even though it's important in our world for survival. The question itself is a very important question, in my view, and one that maybe each of us might take a little time to consider from time to time in our own meditations, as we're not only thinking, but allowing ourselves to attempt to focus on this idea, take it into meditation with us, and soften down what we already believe, and so that we can begin to experience as well as consider ideas that might be a little broader than what we can currently handle. Now, that's very difficult. It's easy to speak, but it's very difficult to do. I believe it's very important for an increase in perception to occur, so that you can, first of all, perceive energy flowing through you all the time, whether it be called nature, as some people believe, Prakriti in the old Eastern orientation. And it is old in years, because it's been kicking around for at least 1,500 years before the Common Era. And according to some, even earlier than that. These are ideas that some believe, at least people who believe in the rishis are the very ancient thinkers. They were quite perceptive and able to perceive these things occurring, and shifts in them, energies changing the amount of flow that was able to come through some of these energetic centers, or doorways, or windows, whatever you want to call them. And then the internal relationship that a person has with their personality, already organized and perfectly fulfilling itself as an image that is in the minds, emotions of individuals, suddenly being shifted a bit, and then the person trying to figure out what was going on, all the rest of it. This has been going on forever. Slow and easy was always the name of the race. Going slow meant you can try and figure stuff out, and it didn't have to be negative or positive. It could be, this sometimes happens in an individual's life. It really didn't know the difference, didn't know the reason why. It's not uncommon. And sometimes people have thought that the mental facility would be the one that would open things up, so that the energy would move through the head, and you would link up with a higher state of mind. Others thought, no, it's the emotional disposition that would open up into a mental level of the emotion, which was the buddhi plane. And it would again be an aspect of the mind moving in, the mental structure moving into the mind plane. So many theories about this. But one of the biggest recognitions is that the personality itself likes to remain the same and move forward based on its own auspices. If you read a book and you learn something from somebody else, then you know something. Well, whether it might have been true or not doesn't matter. You read the book. Therefore, it makes you feel more comforted with yourself. This is a method that we're consistently normally used to. We're not used to the idea of having tremendous levels of creativity thrown at us and then being able to engage with that and then noticing that that was a level of creativity that entered into your mind, this thing up here, thing we call it your brain, and therefore you saw it and spoke it, therefore it was yours. In fact, not realizing that it was something that was laid in there. Whoa, this kind of talk is really related to the soul. You getting my drift? See how difficult that is? You could say that it might be related to another state. Is that other state a soul state? Some believe yes. Some call it a level of creativity. Some call it intuition. So you can see the blurs that occur when you're talking about soul. And some believe that soul is your spiritual aspects and only spiritual, nothing to do with anything other than that. I don't happen to be a prescriber to that particular view. I think we're here with tremendous amounts of reflexes, tremendous amounts of emotion, and a whole bunch of names that we call those emotions. And every one of them is in everybody. And we are learning how to balance those things off, and that's not always easy for us. And we've been trained to see them in certain ways. And when energy comes in, we will defend our old ways of being because that's natural and normal to do. And we will blame other states for imposing that energy on us. Well, take a look at it from a different point of view. We are all of that individually. Therefore, when we are able to have more intensity flow through us, it's because we can engage with it. If we take it step by step by step and look at it physically, emotionally, and mentally, it seems like as if that's what we are, that form. Perhaps we're learning about that. Perhaps it's uncomfortable learning about that. But it is more comfortable maintaining an old view that our personality is the only thing that we find that is valuable. And it's a bit like a power statement. Personality becomes what we want to feed so that it can become more spiritual, more capable, and so we can become more able and more known. That isn't the way it works, I don't think. Can it happen that way? Absolutely. Do you want to be stuck there? Meaning held into a place that doesn't change? Well, that's easy to speak, not easy to live. Change is always difficult. Plus, we have the change that happens every single day of our lives. You wake up in the morning and it's a new day. Sorry, brand new day. That's it. It's not yesterday. It's today. Anticipation rules, maybe, but today is a different day than yesterday. Now, if you want to see it like it was yesterday, then that's different. That isn't the same as seeing that it is today, and it's different. And it's okay that it is. No, you want to bring yesterday back. Well, take a look at the metaphor. A little while ago, I said, if the soul is a reservoir, and I think it is, it's a constructive form that participates in many, many lifetimes. And we try to engage with the next one in a way that would be closer to linking up and being able to function as an individual related to higher states. Now, of course, that's when we came in, we didn't get the contract. We couldn't even write, definitely couldn't read. And had we been able to and could have read the contract right away, maybe it would have said, hi there, you're in a new life. Don't get too squirrely. Be okay with you. Your parents are going to try and bring you up in a particular way. They'll only be trying to help. As weird as it gets, they're only trying to help. They're either trying to help you to be like them or not to be like them. There are the two options. It's possible that there may be a third one, and that's you with the third one. You'll want to be like the first option and be like the second. It's going to be confusing. Sign right here because you'll get help. We'll give you a little juice. It's going to be you giving you the juice, but we're going to say we. We'll give you a little juice because you've had a whole lot of lives, lived a whole lot of stuff, and you have a whole lot of wisdom in you. You just have forgotten it all. And you're okay. Oh, you'll decide what you're going to do. And you won't let anybody help you. And as soon as you let them help you, you're going to assess how it works. And when you assess how it works, it's got to work perfectly because you want to do it yourself. That's normal here. Nothing is negative. And you get to figure it out as soon as you hit about 120. Then you get wiser because you really understand that all the lives you've lived through existence, you've lived them to be helpful, not only to you, but to others. You forgot about that last part. It was in brackets, but you forgot about it. But also you'll remember it and be okay with that. Eventually, if you do happen to notice, that's called experience and perception, then you'll begin to understand that you really don't know very much. And there's a whole lot of stuff that you'll do that wasn't really in a kind of a way only you operating, but aspects of your soul reservoir that was working to help you to become more and more able to be of help to others. Meaning this, those systems, those valves, those doorways open a bit more because you can handle it. And energy from a higher state can come in to help us as, one could say, coarser level beings. If you don't like that one, make one up. So that you can become more refined. And then you'll notice how very difficult refinement is to live. Refinement is not difficult to talk about, but to live. Because all of a sudden, you have started to notice that you are looking through a lens at how you're functioning. And you're looking through the lens from another state. So the state from that lens state is not judging you. just noticing how things work with you. And you'll be helped from there, from you looking through the lens. You'll pull back more. Also, you'll see more. Forgot to tell you about that. And you'll be recognized as a growing being, not as someone who's not doing well, a growing being. And that will be wondrously helpful to those around you because as you grow, you will be helping. Energy will flow through you, helping them to grow. Ah, you did ask the question, what do you think about the soul? Dominic, that's kind of how I think. Now, the difference is this. You don't have to believe this. Thinking is okay. Then the next thing is, as your experience becomes stronger, perceptions become stronger, you'll be trying to figure out what is happening as the energy touches you and flows through you, and you'll begin to notice it. That is the key. And then you'll begin to know there's not about 1 or 2 or 10 or 15 people becoming more perceptive. Therefore, they're really good and able and all that sort of stuff, which we are inundated with in our world. It's about when that happens, do what you can. That's all. Nothing else. Nothing else. Absolutely. And you're just another person doing it differently. That's all. That relates to me the proposition that the soul is a structure there for you to be helpful not only to yourself, but so that other states, higher states, can operate through and be helpful in that movement or that process that you relate to as a growing being so that others can do the same thing. Now, seems like a pretty broad switch, but nonetheless, it's what I think about the soul structure. And I think it also is a reservoir. Our personalities are basically reservoirs. That's what I think. You often wonder why you did one thing versus another. It's a good thing. Good thing to wonder about that. Not so great if you don't wonder about anything. But that's where you are. Be curious. Wonder why you do something. You don't even have to agree with the doing of it. That means you're cultivating a lens through which not only to see, but to express. And go slow with it. There's no rule that says right, wrong, good, bad. It's look, see, try to understand, move forward. Let that go. Move forward. Understand differently. Each day, different day. Do what you can. I hope that helps a little bit. I've tried to confuse you as much as I possibly could. And you'll probably tell me that I succeeded. Or maybe not. Anyway, let me try the next question. This one is from Jennifer Butler. And she says, I'm wondering about the heart center in relation to the solar plexus. Does the heart center take over more often for the solar plexus over time? Or rather, do these shifts in the energy centers occur without pattern and more according to what we need as we grow? What's your take on soul contracts? We're just I hope that one helps you, Jennifer. Do you think there is such a thing? She's talking about uh, there are concepts about soul contracts that relate to personalizations, where a person is born into this world to look after so and so. I think that's less, personally, I think that's less real than you engaging with this life to try and help yourself in your internal development as an individual. I think that's really a hard sell based on it has smacks of religious background. But I think it's doesn't make it any less real. You're trying to look at yourself, and there are so many ways of seeing how a person should be. Try having 10 or 15 people in a room and asking them for an opinion about something. And in our world, depending on what television programs they're looking at, what they're reading, what their friends say, what newspapers they're reading, if they're still reading newspapers, or how the area around them and all the people who are around them are thinking. It depends a lot on this kind of relationship that they have with others, what they will believe, and how they were brought up. We have so many variables, and it's hard for us to make sense of some of them. But then the other person might say, it's hard to make sense of the one that you have. So when you're looking at these kinds of things, this concept of contracts, I would say go for the higher state contract. So you'll do what you can. And no matter what you do, it'll probably be what you can. And try and be okay with opening a little bit. And then if you have a method of submerging, submerge a little bit and come back out and open a little bit. And it's like, oh my, when you're out playing a basketball game or a baseball game or even the real pros, they're not on all the time. They have to take a break from themselves. And then they grumble and moan about how poorly they played in that last game. It's because that's where they were. They didn't see that that's where they were. They just were focused on putting a ball in a basket or hitting a baseball when it was coming. It's the way it works. All of us are the same. Now, here's the other one. I'm wondering about the heart center in relation to the solar plexus. Does the heart center take over more often for the solar plexus over time? Oh boy, it's really a difficult question. I'm going to presume that you know that the root, gonad, and solar plexus centers are foundational centers. They are systems that are used so that we have energy to function physically, emotionally, and mentally. And there's a kind of relative integration that comes together with this energetic kind of profiling that we do and talk about ourselves in terms of an individual personality. In the old traditions, they said that each one of these foundational energy centers move in a direction, have energy move in a direction upward towards the top of the head, which includes the heart center, the throat center, a whole series of centers in behind the back and the front, and behind the head and above the head. And when there is a link between them, even just as much as a tiny thread, there is the beginning of activity that relates to enabling the individual to become quite able at something, whatever it is. If they pick tiddlywinks, they'll become really able at that. If that's their blood and joy, their happiness. If they're egocentric, they'll become really good at being egocentric. If they're a baseball player, if they're a spiritual person, if you're a yogi, you'll become really good at being a yogi. If you're a drinker, you'll become good at being a drinker. If you're you name it, you'll become really good at that. You'll do this because you'll be attempting to utilize energies that come into you for a purpose that prior to the moment when you can see beyond your own self-interest, prior to that moment, and including that moment, you will be attempting to make sure you're okay in a world that's fairly focused on these things. One way or the other, good, bad, or indifferent. Can be, you might be a warrior, you might be, it just doesn't matter what it is. Now that doesn't look good, but it is, because you're using energy for a purpose that really may come out of this business of the solar reservoir I was talking about. If any of the lower centers are quite active, then some of the upper ones will be active in aspects that relate to the lower centers. So the brow you can be very bright in something that turns your crank. It doesn't have to be physics. It might be just self-protection. There's nothing negative about that. You're very bright. So you use it or you use it. I don't care where it is. It's where you're using your capability. And you're doing that because that may be helpful eventually in allowing you to see that you're using it for that. Remember the lens I was talking about? You start to open differently and see things that you're doing and wonder why you're doing them. It's just an honest question. Doesn't have anything attached to it. No whip, no contract, no nothing. No negativity to it. It's just that's what you're doing. So you're, in a way unknown to you, you're teaching yourself about you. But also you're teaching yourself about every other individual who is living and ever lived and ever will. That's big stuff. So if you grumble or you elevate what you're seeing, you're just teaching. That's all. So allow yourself to pull back from both of those, any one of those, and see what you're teaching you. In the soul reservoir, it may be there in another lifetime or many, or you did something similar or different, the opposite. So you're learning to find the middle ground in this. If you can find the middle ground, or just for a second or two, not necessarily agree with you, then there's an automatic posing of a question that you might ignore. What am I doing that for? Is it necessary for me? That's interesting. I'm not even sure I really like doing that. Now it's okay if you pull back a bit. Pulling back a bit is at your discretion, not somebody else's. Nobody can tell you what to do in this. You have to be okay with how you consider what is enough and what's not enough, all that kind of thing. It's you working through you. Why should it be like that? Because that stimulation of the heart center, for example, in those early stages of the heart center, They're wonderfully refined, strongly sympathetic, and very able to align with anything that relates to you being the you that needs to be protected, whatever that means. And none of it is negative. Absolutely none. Far too much time spent on the delivery of how important it is to assess in a not so positive way or to elevate in an exceptionally idealistic manner somehow. But that's the heart center at play. But it works with the emotional center, it works with the root center, it works with the gonad center. And if you have energy moving all the way up, it works with the throat center, the brow center, the crown center. And you can perceive it in those moments. If you have any perception whatsoever, you can notice around you the energy can get quite strong, even when you're doing something you would rather not be doing. From a perspective, here's one thing that's really difficult to understand. Nobody gets it right. You do what you can. It's a work in progress. All of this is process from the beginning to the end. Cultivation, renovation, respect, understanding. Even with those who don't agree with you. Even with those who do agree with you. At some point, you start giggling a bit and think, how could that be possible? The giggle is a good thing. I have a lot of respect for a lot of people who said, it's really good to have some good laughs, even to cultivate them, because it changes the chemistry inside, and we're just chemistry factories. And it's allowed. I don't know whether that covers that territory totally. I know the business of the heart center. The heart center is a center that we believe we know a lot about. And I'm inclined to think that we don't. One additional place in that heart center, sometimes it's like it makes your whole system feel empty inside. Well, that's an interesting statement to make, that the heart center could do that. But just think, if you're in a very crowded room, this is in the old days, everybody smoking, everybody having a drink, and no one talking too much sense, maybe a little. And you try to talk sense to a friend that you're across from, and it's very hard to hear. Well, with that kind of metaphor, think about the heart center. Ultimately, for a moment or two, as the upper part of it starts opening, it links with that throat center and creates kind of an empty place. You look at someone that you cared for 24 hours before that, and here's what you notice. You've got no feeling in there. It's like being in an empty room, and suddenly it became empty. Here's the word I think is better. Silent. You're looking to find out where that caring is. And so you try to remember when you were 16, 18, 25, 50, I don't care what it was. And you felt something. This is the personality's way of understanding life is okay. But here, as that upper part of the chest opens, there's silence. It's a very dangerous place to be in with a personality that believes that caring and loving has to be very much emotionally engaged with. And there is no emotion there. Don't worry, it's coming back. Because you're learning how to get to a place like that, but not including the judgment. Not including the judgment. You know there's caring, there's loving, and it's just your focus is not in that place that allows you to perceive that love that you have. You're about to perceive it mentally. The link up between the throat center and the brow, including the upper part of the chest at one point where those three head centers are really functioning a little bit at least, suddenly there will be a link in with the solar plexus, which means including the root and the gonad center. These are stages of development. They link up and they are slow sometimes. And they're fraught with personalized disbelief, meaning you can hardly believe that you could be caring for someone and not feeling that you're caring in a very particular way because that's the way you've had your training of caring. This is that strange heart center and the opening beyond the lower part, sympathetic part of the heart center, which is not negative at all, but really helpful at times. I'll leave you with that, just to think about that one, Jennifer. And thank you very much for listening, everybody. Good night.